I'd like to welcome everyone to this Business Website Basics series. And the topic for today is elements of design and how to work with a designer with me, John Wilfred and Sean Miller. Before we get into the session, let me give you a quick overview of Zoho Showtime. So there are a couple of tabs towards your left. So these are the four important tabs. The first one is the questions tab. So if you have any questions during this session, please enter them in the questions tab and my colleagues will answer them. If we don't get to you right away, we will drop an email with the answers. The next one is the polls tab. We will be rolling out a few polls during the session. Please do participate in all our polls. And next is the chat box. So this is where all the chat happens. My colleagues will be posting the links here. And if you face any issue with audio or video, you can let us know through the chat box. However, if there is an issue with audio or video, the first aid would be to refresh your browser because majority of the time it solves the issue. And last but not the least, we have the handouts tab, and there is a beautifully crafted handout attached over there. It's called The Elements of Design, and it was designed by Sean Miller. Please do download the handout anytime before the session ends. So I will give you a quick introduction of what Zoho is and a little bit about the series, and then jump into the session. So Zoho is a SaaS-based business, and we've been around for almost 24 years now, since 1996. We have applications for almost every department in a business, starting from marketing, sales, finance, HR, backend operations like event management, building a low-code application builder, whatnot. We have so many applications that can help business get about their day-to-day activities. We have a wing spread across 200 plus countries, and we are completely private, bootstrapped, and profitable, which is all the more reason why customer data is extremely secure with us. Since we do not rely on advertisements, even the free version of Zoho products do not display any advertisements. The Business Website Basic has a total of 5 webinar series, 2 of which are already over. If you have missed it, you can ask for a recording and we'll share it with you. And today it's Element of Design with me and Sean. And next week will be a consultation of the first 3 webinars, wherein Ange will take you through converting visitors to customers through web forms, CTA forms, or other tools. And finally, the last week, Lyra will take you through Zoho One for every business need, wherein she'll discuss about Zoho One and its applications. So if you wish to sign up for these upcoming webinars, you could very well log into zoho.com/au/r/how-to. We'll also post the link on the chat box. You could also click on the link and directly jump to the registration page. So a few key takeaways of today's session. So if you're building your own website, mostly business owners are stuck not knowing where to start. Well, we'll solve the problem for you. After this webinar, you can have a really good head start as to how to build a website. And next, we will help you understand the basics of visual hierarchy. And common misconceptions and jargons will be deconstructed by Sean. He'll also take you through how to talk to a designer and share some helpful resources with you. So why is this important? I mean, we all understand that you're here because you feel that this is important. But just to give you a head start, your first impression is the best impression. Imagine a lead walking into your website and turning around immediately and walking away disappointed. That's not going to leave a good impression. The more time a lead or a visitor spends on your website, the better are the chances for him or her to be converted into a customer. And next is the perception of the customer about your brand. So your website will talk about your credibility and trustworthiness. An up-to-date website will talk a lot about how organized you have things. When I say up-to-date, it's not about having a futuristic website. It's about having a functioning website, which Sean will discuss about later. And finally, your website drives home your unique brand voice. So brand voice itself is a separate webinar, which is already over. However, you can have a look at the recording of that webinar to understand what a brand voice is. So before you build a website or before you even start designing a website, there is a key question that you should ask yourself. How does my website serve its visitors? So are you going to build a website just because your competitor has one? Or does your website provide value to its visitors? Well, to get this sorted out, all you need is a pen and a paper. Yes. A first good step would be to map your website. So here we have an example of a real estate website's map. So here, when visitor enters the website, there is a very clear distinction between commercial and residential property. So the visitor need not loiter around the website searching for what to see and searching for his requirement. Okay, so because a clear distinction is given here. Likewise, there is a customer testimonial section, and for websites such as a real estate website, customer testimonials are really, really important because that talks about your relationship with the customer. And not just that, customer testimonials can work as a really good marketing tool. And then there is this project section wherein you can have ongoing projects, past projects, sold out projects, all those that can help the visitors weigh your business as to how big you are. And next comes the About Us page. So let me just take a few minutes to talk about the About Us page because I feel that the About Us page is, almost every time underrated by business owners. So when I talk to business owners who build their own website, all they need is to get their products or services up on their website. And when I ask them about Us page, they most of the time the answer I get is that we haven't thought about it yet. So About Us page is important just as any other page because it talks about who you are. So for a real estate business, the About Us page should not be like, hey, we're a real estate agency. We sell commercial and residential properties. If you're interested in our services or if you're interested in our properties, click on the link here. That is not an About Us page. An About Us page should talk about your philosophy. It should talk about who you are. It should talk about the very essence of why you are in the business in the first place. All right. So, for instance, when it comes to the real estate business, global warming is a major thing here. So, how does this business contribute to a greener environment? How does it contribute to renewable energy? So, how does it contribute to its corporate social responsibility? What does it give back to the society? So, all that is what makes an About Us page. And finally, you have the contact page, where again there is a clear distinction between commercial and residential properties. Okay? So always make sure that you have the contact page or the contact section very prominent because when a customer or a visitor wants to contact you, it should be easy for them to reach out to you. If it's going to be difficult, that is not going to look good, and there are plenty of visitors who might just walk away just because they can't find a contact section. Okay. So now that you have a map with you, what's next? Well, yes. So everything that you've drawn on a piece of paper now needs to be converted into a visual tree. That is exactly where visual hierarchy comes into play. So visual hierarchy, although it might sound a little technical, trust me, it is not so technical at all. The visual hierarchy has two major concepts in it. Number one, attention grabbing, and number two is conveying the information in the order of importance. So before I explain this, let me show you an example. This is an example for visual hierarchy. So this is a real estate website, and the moment I enter this website, it reeks of luxury. So there is a 20% off on our elite properties, and there is a book now button with the contrasting black and white. When a visitor enters this website, this is the first information that they see. There is a luxurious lounge, there is an elite apartment, and there are these high-rising buildings looking down on greenery. So this is what they see. So this is what they get at 20% off. So here they are conveying the information in the order of importance. Just because there's a 20% off on elite properties, they did not remove the home page or projects or virtual tour or anything at all. It is still there. But today, the matter of importance is a 20% off on their elite properties. So this is what visual hierarchy is. And in order to get the visual hierarchy right, there are a few tools that you need to understand first. So let's have a look at what those tools are. And these tools and any description regarding these tools are clearly given in the booklet attached in the handout Elements of Design. Please do download it anytime before the session ends. So here we go. Tool number one is size. So the moment I say size, it would strike to us that it is the size of the font. Well, yes, it is the size of the font, but not just that. It is the size of every element that you use in building a website. It could be a font, it could be a text box, it could be, let's say an image, it could be a gallery, it could be a carousel, it could be a form that you use. The right size always matters. An oversized form can, blind the design element and, not be that effective. Likewise, a form that is too small can be very difficult for the viewers to fill. So getting getting these elements of the right size is really important. Well, yes, next we have the color. So I, for one, a few years back, I always had this impression that a perfect design is a design with as many colors as possible. Well, I was completely wrong. You could build a completely professional website with just one color and multiple shades of it. So unless you're going to sell candies, or if your business is going to cater to kindergarten children or toddlers, I'm pretty sure you can build a complete website with as much as just 3 to 4 colors and with multiple combinations of it. And next comes the contrast tool. So contrast again is a very effective tool, and this will be used when we talk about the attention grabbing part of visual hierarchy. So don't make your entire web page in contrasting colors. That's going to look really odd. Rather, imagine a subtle ivory colored website, and all of a sudden there is a small pop-up and contrast red and yellow. Okay, that's going to grab attention. So use contrast to grab attention of your viewers, but also make sure that you use the right pinch of contrast. Don't overdo it. The very important tool here is alignment. I'm not going to talk about it right now because I'm going to talk about it in the following slides. Let's go on to the next tool. Repetition. So repetition is yet another tool that can be really effective in most cases. I'm going to talk about the previous example again, where we saw there is a 20% off on elite properties. So when I say repetition, it doesn't mean that you have to use the same word 20% off on elite properties on every single page. That is going to be a little irritating for the viewers. But rather, what you could do is you can use tiny motifs here and there that conveys the intended message. So probably like offer, or deal closes soon, or probably a tiny text bar that has the text running saying offer ends soon, or 20% off, something like that. But do not use the same font, do not use the same text, do not have the bold appearance in every single page, because your viewers, the moment they enter your website, they've already seen that there is a 20% off. If they move to the next page, which means that they're looking for something else, you can't give the same information again and again, and that's going to not going to look so good on your visitors. So please make sure you use repetition, but in the right format. And here we have the white spaces, the most underestimated color in designing. So, as I told you, when I was talking about color, I used to fill all my designs with plenty of colors. Likewise, I make sure that there is not even a single white space. Until one day, my mentor told me that my presentation looked very claustrophobic. So I didn't understand what he said. So I just asked him what to do. So he said, leave some space to the left and a little bit of space to the right, just empty white space. The entire appearance of my presentations completely changed. So that is how special white spaces are. So what happens is, when you use white spaces, your visitors, they just don't get distracted. Rather, they get focused to their desired element. And this is again a really good technique that you can use in terms of attention grabbing. There are again other tools like textures and a lot more, which is discussed in the Elements of Design booklet. So now we have the first question answered, and then we have our map ready, and we now know how to get it visual using the visual hierarchy tools. So what's next? Well, it's all cooked and ready. Now comes the plating part, the alignment. Yes. So grids can help you with measuring spaces and keeping your content looking neat and organized. Okay, so you can assume grids some more are like the training wheels for design. If you do not have a digital tool for grid, not to worry. Just grab a few graphs and start designing your website on those graphs. Make sure that you place all the elements right. You might not get it right the first time, but it's cool, no problem at all. So it's just a piece of paper, so you can do it multiple times until you get it right. And one thing that you'll have to remember when you arrange these elements is that our eyes is generally tuned to move from left to right. The Z formation that you see here on the screen is how you read English. From left to right, you start with left and end in the right. Likewise, the right-hand side of this slide deck shows you how the design element starts with left and ends with right and has the content in between. So please make sure that you have a very clear idea about the Z formation while you begin building your website. One tip is that when you're going to use a drag and drop website, please always compare it with the graph that you've already designed. So most of the websites now are drag and drop websites, and not just that, these websites offer hundreds of templates. So what you could do is you could take your graph and compare it with a template that is either an exact match or a near match. If it's going to be an exact match, pick up the template, then change the content, probably the color if you want, and then make use of that as your website. If it's going to be a near match, make a few tweaks, drag and drop, make sure that it follows the grid pattern. And all these tools are already embedded in website builders, so that if you're going to go out of the margin or the frame, it'll let you know. So not to worry about that at all. So please make sure that you follow all these tips if you're going to build your own website. So that's it. Building a website is very simple. Always stick to the basics, stick to these basic rules, and you'll get your own beautiful website. But if you feel that all this is overwhelming and you think hiring a designer to help you would be the best way to go, trust me, even that is not easy. You can't just call a designer and tell him that, hey, I run a real estate business, I want a website in the next 7 days. That's not how it works. You will have to transfer your knowledge to the designer. All right, and that requires certain levels of skills. And our next presenter has some really useful tips for you that can get you going in hiring a designer. So here we go. I'm going to welcome Sean to take the session forward. Hey Sean, the virtual stage is all yours.
All right, thank you very much. I just want to do a quick sound check. Can everybody hear me? Am I
Yes,
coming
Sean, we can
through
hear
loud and
you.
clear? Hopefully more clear than loud.
Yeah, it is clear, Sean.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. So yeah, my name is Sean Miller, and I am an illustrator and graphic designer. I also work for the Zoho customer advocacy team, and a large part of my day consists of designing graphics for social media, a little bit of design, and every now and then some illustration as well. So this is something that's really near and dear to my heart. That is actually how I got my start here at Zoho, and I'm really excited to be here with you. I've got some cool exercises that we can do together to put some of these things that John shared with us into practice. And we'll kind of start to dive a little bit deeper into some of these maybe higher level concepts, and I can break these down for you when it comes to building your business website. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the questions module, and I will get to them as soon as possible in case I start going a little too fast or if these things go over your head. So, who's going to benefit? Well, If you're a business owner, this information will benefit you because you might find yourself in a position where you are thinking that you're going to have to hire a designer to help you build your website. You might be somebody who is designing your website by yourself by the means of a drag and drop website builder. Um, and a lot of those are very easy to use, but there are some things to keep in mind that we'll get into. And also, people who are working with a central design team. Maybe you work for a business where you have a central or internal design team that is responsible for your landing pages, social media graphics, and marketing materials. I think you'll find this helpful. Just to go back to the title of my part of the presentation, it was how to talk to a designer. But hopefully, you will be able to learn how to think like a designer as well by the time we're done with this here. So, what are we going to discuss? Well, I thought it would be helpful to clear up some misconceptions and misunderstanding when it comes to design. Because when you hire a designer, you might think, well, I need to understand what it is that a designer does, and I might need to know all this jargon and lingos. But that is surprisingly not as important as you might think. And we're going to clear up some of those misconceptions through understanding the function of design. And we're going to get to the heart of the matter, which is the ultimate goal for your business website. And to do that, to accomplish that goal, you have two very powerful tools at your disposal. And I'm going to show you how to use those. One of them is called show and tell, and the other one is clear communication. And that probably goes without saying, but I'll show you through the use of one word in particular how communication can help us for better or worse. So, lastly, we will find how to find a designer through resources, online resources, and other resources in case you want to design yourself. I'll show you some things that I use on a daily basis that can help you, and also what to look for when hiring a designer. A lot of times, we might see an offering from somebody on a website and just not even know if they're good. So I'll show you what to look for when it comes to hiring a designer. And my favorite part of the webinars is the question and answer. So get those questions ready, and hopefully, John and I will provide all the answers you need. So let's get right into it and start talking about the misconceptions and whether or not you need to know the jargon. So, my time as a freelance designer and illustrator, I noticed that this was probably the most common misconception, that design and art are the same thing, and they're interchangeable. Now, I can understand why that happens because there is design in art and there is art in design. However, these are two completely different disciplines, and I will show you why it's important to know the difference. So the main difference is really when it comes down to the function of each. Now, with design, its function is to deliver a message clearly and concisely with the least amount of frills involved. It's only there to deliver the message, to make sure that the audience gets it. Now, art, on the other hand, is it has the primary function of getting the audience to feel a message. Excuse me. So these two things do overlap. And again, as I said, there is art and design and vice versa, but they are two separate things. Um, Now, when they overlap, this is the section that we are going to be focused on mainly. This is your brand message. We want to make sure that you have a strong brand message, a strong brand story. That's how this all relates to your business website. So, if we don't know the difference, what happens is there's some conflict that exists in that middle portion there. And there's a little note down at the bottom that I want you to direct your attention to. Somebody who's a great artist is not always going to be a great designer. And the reason I put that there is because I got my start as an artist. And a lot of times people would hire me for a logo or some sort of marketing material or something like that, and I didn't always know what I was doing because I didn't understand the two primary functions of art and design. So I'm speaking from experience. Trust me, I've gotten a lot better at that. But what can happen is something that I like to call message distortion. What happens if the artsy side or the design side starts to get unbalanced? It results in a message or a brand story that is distorted, and people don't always understand what it is that your business does. So, let's kind of delve a little deeper into this, break it up a little more. How does this relate to your business website? Well, let's take that first half of our diagram, the design side. Now we're going to start to get into a little bit of the jargon, and I'll hold your hand through this. Don't worry too much. So when it comes to design, what we're talking about here on this side is the UX, which is probably something you're familiar with or have heard at least. This is talking about user experience. So this is all about what the user does and how they interact with your website and the content on that site. So, when it comes to making sure that you have strong UX, you can see that while this is by no means meant to be an exhaustive diagram, these are some of the things that fall under the umbrella of good UX design. The wireframing and prototyping. That would also go back to what John talked about, which was the use of grids, the way the information architecture, the interaction design, all of these things fall under this side of our diagram. So, again, keep in mind this is involving what a user does and how they interact. Now, on the other side of our diagram, the more artsy side, so to speak, that would be UI, which is probably something you've heard before, or the user interface. Now, this all has to do with how the user feels when they are interacting with a website. Now, I'm sure that everybody here can probably think back to a really bad website that they've gone to where that you start clicking around, it doesn't look pleasing, you just get stuck in this weird endless loop of following all these links. It's all happened to us. Or we've seen something that looks confusing, we don't get it, that would fall to the user interface. So this has to do with good visual presentation, which would be the use of colors, fonts, or typography, the way things are laid out. And that all is addressed in the handout. And John kind of broke that down for us a little bit. So, one way to think about this that can be helpful when it relates to your business website is to focus right there in the middle. Remember, our website and the brand messaging, the story, the brand story that we have, that's what we're trying to make really strong. And it's through what users do and how they feel. So try to think of it this way. Imagine your website is your house and it's broken up into these two categories. The UX side of the house would be the structural frame, the plumbing, the electrical, and then the other side, the UI side, would have to do with more of the finishing touches, like the roof, the paint, the furniture, the landscaping, what makes it pleasing. So I don't want you to think that one is more important than the other. They combine in a very interesting way. They're made for each other, really. They're two different parts of the whole. So maybe that might be helpful for you to think of it that way. If we spent time in a house that wasn't decorated or wasn't pleasing to be inside, we probably wouldn't hang out there very long. And if we did have a house that was functional, um, but wasn't comfortable, we wouldn't hang out there very long either. So I thought that might be an easy way for you to understand this here. If it's still over your head, that's okay. We're going to stick to the basics. So I've come up with two exercises that are really fun and demonstrate this in a really easy to understand way. So let's take this first one. Here is an example of message distortion through UI. And the UI, in this case, directly influences the user experience. So on the left-hand side, we see a stop sign. We're all familiar with this. We know exactly what it's telling us to do. It's bright, attention-grabbing, and we know that we need to stop. Otherwise, we might end up in a car accident. Now, if you look at the example to the right, the message is the same, right? It's the same word, but because the sign is unfamiliar to us and the script font might be a little bit difficult to read, we don't really understand what we're stopping for. Are we stopping to avoid an accident? Are we stopping for a year end closeout sale at some used car dealership? Are we stopping for an amusement park? What is this sign trying to convey to us? So this is an example of message distortion. The message is the same, but we don't necessarily understand in the second example what it's trying to get us to do. So let's try this again. This is an exercise that I wish I could take credit for. I learned this from another designer, and it's called type tasting. So, what I want you to do is look at these two words. We see that they're the same word, but I want you to pay attention to the emotional reaction that you have based on how it's written out for you. So at the top, we have the word surprise. Now, for me, when I see it spelled out this way, I tend to think, oh, this is, a birthday card or an anniversary card, or maybe this is a cereal box with a fun toy inside. Normally, when we see the word surprise written out this way, we expect something good to follow, right? Now, if you look down at the way it's spelled out here, surprise in this way is more of a spooky, scary surprise, right? Like you come home and surprise, you had a vampire waiting behind your door, and now suddenly, surprise, you've been bitten and you're a vampire too. You see that the emotional response is completely different based on the visual presentation. So, the reason I put this here is one, it does a really good job of showing the power of UI and UX. But a lot of times we can find these decorative fonts and we think they're really fun and cool, but if we're not careful, they can convey the wrong message. So these are two obvious extreme examples, but I think it makes the point quite nicely. So again, we ask the question, why is all of this important? Well, aside from using all this information to avoid message distortion, talking to and working with a designer involves having a basic understanding of how a designer thinks. So we can kind of sum it up this way: a designer, or you in this instance, if you are designing it yourself, should be very intentional with the choices you make as far as your design choices in order to avoid any sort of message distortion. Again, the message is your brand and your brand story. And if we need more clarification on that, this is what we're talking about. It's so important to maintain and build trust. So that's the ultimate goal. Now, I'm sure you've heard many times over that we're never supposed to judge a book by its cover, right? Unfortunately, that's kind of what we do. And I can illustrate it this way. When I go to buy a bottle of wine, I don't know anything about wine, and I usually just pick the bottle that has the coolest label. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit it. But it's the same thing that goes with your website. Usually, the first interaction that a person has with your business or your brand is your website. So, their opinion of you is formed based on how it looks. A lot of times, that will usually be their lasting impression of your brand. So, a well designed website that shows thought for how your users feel and interact is going to show that you care about what you do, you care about the person, you take yourself seriously. And when people see that, it instills confidence in your business and your brand. And once that confidence is built and your brand is established, you can start to build loyalty. That's a very difficult thing to break, and that's really, really good. That's the ultimate goal. So now you might be thinking, oh my goodness, I've got all this weight on my shoulders. I see there's tons of responsibility when it comes to designing, and you might feel like this lady here. You know what? That's okay. I feel like this person a lot. There's a lot of high level concepts that go over my head, but again, we're going to keep it simple. We'll stick to the basics, and remember I said that you have some very powerful tools. So let's get into that. Let's get into discovering your powerful tools, and we're going to do that with the first one. And then remember that one was called show and tell. So what does show and tell mean? Well, show and tell, as it pertains to building a website, has to do with mood boards. And maybe you've never put together a mood board, but if you've spent any time on Instagram or Pinterest, you're probably familiar with what a mood board is, even if you didn't know that that's what it's called. Basically, it's a collection of inspiration. It's all the things that you like. And if you see here, this is one that I put together based on my own personal taste. I like these colors. I like the font choices, the use of black and white photography. I like the fun graphics. They all are different, but you can see that they all kind of gel, right? They all mix together nicely. So, what you want to do when it comes to your business website, um, and this was not a point I was going to make earlier, but it just dawned on me right now. Maybe you already have a website and you want to give it a facelift, so to speak. Again, make a mood board, and I'll show you why it's important. So let's say you're hiring a designer, right? The mood board is so important because it does all of the heavy lifting for you. You don't have to know any of the jargon or any of the terminology. All you have to do is create this mood board, pass it off to your designer, and say, "This is what I like." Now, here, if I was a designer and had a client and they gave me this, I would look at it and say, "Oh, okay, I kind of have an idea of the colors they like, the font choices they like, the structures. And because I've worked in this field for a long time, I know what these things are called and I can find them easily for them." If you're doing this by yourself, this is also going to act as a compass to help keep you on track so that your website has a very cohesive look. This is very, very important, and you can see at the end there that, one that I've highlighted in blue, that point there, it says, "It's also here to showcase your personal taste, style, and personality." I can't stress this enough. This is extremely important if you are working with a designer in particular, and, this is important because your personality, and again, remember your message, that strong message through good UI and UX, when those two things combine, this is going to make for a really authentic experience. This is going to have a very human first feel to your business and your business website. So, here's a little pro tip. A lot of times what can happen is we find sources of inspiration that we really like, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no such thing as a bad source of inspiration when it comes to designing. However, it's extremely important not to get married to one design aesthetic in particular. So for instance, if you direct your attention to, I mean, I'm sure your attention is already there. It's the loud, obnoxious graphic down at the bottom right. That there is something that I liked, but think of this. Now, let's say you have a business, you are an accounting firm or a tax preparation service or doctor's office or something. That particular source of inspiration might not work for you because it conveys the wrong message. It's resulting in some distortion. However, if you are trying to convey the sense that you are the coolest and the youngest and the hippest and fastest accounting firm on the block, then sure, maybe give it a try. However, again, this might result in message distortion. So again, there's no such thing as bad inspiration. Just make sure that we don't get hung up or married to one source of inspiration and put our foot down and want to make that work. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and that's okay. Now, this slide is geared for the people who are doing it by themselves. So, John alluded to this a little earlier, but in this case, you, if you're doing this by yourself, are both the chef and the waiter. Now, the reason this slide exists is because a lot of times we get very excited and we want people to see our shiny new website, and we're so proud of it, and we just want to get to that presentation stage first. Now, if we let excitement get the better of us, a lot of times we don't pay attention to the UX and we focus a little bit too much on the UI, and the usability of our site will suffer. What you want to do in the case of a chef, we make sure that all of the ingredients come together first. Just in the same way a waiter would not bring all the individual ingredients to the table, he brings a fully cooked meal. And that way you ensure that the people that interact with your website are going to have a great experience. So let's get into the next most powerful tool. Again, if you remember, this had to do with communication. And this might seem a little anticlimactic, But here we are. This is your most powerful word. And this word can, how should I put it? This can go one of two ways. It can help you or hurt you based on how we use it. Now, if you are from my neck of the woods, which would be Northern California, we tend to overuse this word like, and it does get overused because when we interact on social media, what do? We like things, don't we? So a lot of times when we use this word, we say things like, "Oh, give me something sort of like or kind of like," and that's how we use this word in day to day speaking to people. But as it pertains to design and your website, we're going to do a little exercise here and you can see what can happen. So, let's say you've hired a designer, they're very good, you are confident in them and their ability. You give them your website inspirations through your mood board, and you say, "Yeah, give me something sort of like this." Now, this is what the designer hears. When we frame it that way, when we say, "Give me something sort of like this," what the designer thinks is, "Oh, I have permission to use my artistic license." So that can be okay if you're open to that. So in this illustration, what is on your mind is, to the left, obviously, and then we say, "Well, give me something sort of like that." And now the designer's interpretation is what we have here. Now, the designer is actually on track because they did give you something sort of like your original source of inspiration. And you might be totally open to that. That works. But here's what happens. If the designer starts to introduce a little bit of abstraction to the original source of inspiration, well, this can yield a result that might not be acceptable to you, or it might be. What I like to call this, if we don't use this word like correctly, I like to call this the like spectrum. And that's where you're going to find yourself if we don't use this word correctly. So you can see that the designer's interpretation is going to skew a little far left or right, depending on their interpretation and whether or not they have introduced abstraction into what you have said. And again, that can be okay if you're open to, the surprising results that this is going to yield. However, poor communication can start to build frustration, and the frustration builds because we know that time is money. And let's face it, in a specialized field like UX and UI design, they typically aren't cheap. So, you can start to feel like your time is being wasted, your money is being wasted, and then the designer can start to feel that their skills are being wasted because, based on their interpretation, they thought they gave you exactly what you asked for. So, unfortunately, I have found myself in this position due to poor communication on my end and poor communication on the client's end. But really, the key is being specific. Specificity is the name of the game when it comes to your business website. Because remember, a lot of the opinions that people are going to form about you and your business, and quite frankly, your product or service that you're offering, is going to be based on whether or not your website is good. So, if you've got an example of a great website that you would like to imitate, it's important to use the word like this. That way, when you give your source of inspiration to your designer, their interpretation is going to be a little bit more on point to what you have asked for. And you know what? You're going to have a fantastic experience. You, as the client, are going to be happy. The designer is going to love working for you. And this is so important because a lot of times the people who design your website are the same people that you're going to turn to again and again when you have to update the site, or if you need them to make some marketing materials or graphics that have a cohesive look with the rest of your site. So it's really key to make sure that you maintain a great working relationship with your designer. So we kind of focused a little bit on the people who are hiring a designer. But again, this applies to not just them, but people who are doing it by themselves. If you're designing your site by yourself, it's important to know what you like, know what your tastes are, know why they like it. Really spend some time exploring the things that make you happy when you see a good website. learn about what those things are called. And this is going to happen naturally as you start doing Google searches and as you start seeing. You'll notice a trend. You'll start to see what certain fonts are called or the style of graphics, and you'll familiarize yourself with the terminology. It just kind of happens naturally. So if you're hiring a designer, again, it's important to know what you like and learn how to articulate what you like about those things. And any good designer is going to ask you normally, but it is good to know. It's good to know, and it's fun. Honestly, it's really fun talking to a designer and a client um, about the things that they like. And as I said earlier, these would apply to people who work with a central design team. So if you're somebody, let's say you work on a marketing team and you need some graphics from your central design, you can give them examples with a mood board and say, hey, look, Google did this really cool thing. How about you give me something like that? And this is going to work really well for you. So before we get into the helpful resources, I have a poll for all of you to engage with here. Let me start the poll, and I'll give you a little bit of time to look at these and start voting on them. This is helpful for me because, as much as I love to talk about this stuff, I want to make sure that it's helpful for you. So, if you could spend a little time uh, answering these polls or the questions, that would be great. That way, we can make some more content that would be useful for you. And again, I'll give you a little time to think about this. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for their time and for allowing me to join you for this. I get a kick out of it as much as you might. I live and breathe this stuff, so I like talking about it. My kids don't really have any interest, so if I can hop on a webinar and talk to you people about it, I'd love it. So it looks like we got some votes in, and I will be respectful of your time and show the votes and get moving here. Oh, we got a couple more trickling in. If anybody would like to continue to participate, I'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay, so there we go. It looks like all of the above. So I've got my work cut out for me. Um, and I would be happy to do this for you. I don't know how soon it'll happen, but trust me, I will get right to work on it. So let's get back into the webinar and look at these helpful resources. So, books on design. These are things that I use, like I said, almost on a daily basis. I don't like the titles of these books, but the For Dummies books are very helpful. I have a couple and I find them to be really useful. Um, pardon me, excuse me. The Color Inspirations book, that one is one that I use constantly. This one, especially when it comes to maybe redesigning a website, or if you have a logo that you want to make sure the rest of the website complements, this book is extremely helpful. Again, I use it all the time. Also, Making and Breaking the Grid. That book is considered essential reading for designers. So, if this is something that you want to tackle on your own, or maybe you even want to change your career and be a graphic designer, it's totally doable. It's going to take a little time, but this book is something that you must read. It does have some high level concepts in it, so it might take a little time to understand and implement, and it can seem a little daunting. But trust me, it's fantastic. A lot of people consider it their design Bible. So if you would like to find a designer to work with, I would suggest starting with Upwork and Fiverr, especially Upwork. That is one where you can set the budget. Maybe you are a little tight on your budget. Well, this one here, you can have designers bid on your job. Behance and 99 Designs are very good, but I would say that a lot of the designers there are maybe a little bit more expensive. So if budget is something you have to take into consideration, maybe start with Upwork and poke around there, see if you can find somebody. Again, it's really important that you look for somebody with a strong portfolio that has examples of web design, not just art and graphics. And I'll show you some examples of what to look for in just a moment. Um, if you would like to get your own design tools, I would recommend Adobe. They're considered the industry standard. I use Adobe Illustrator for just about every single thing I do, including mockups for websites. Adobe XD is specifically for that, but Illustrator works as well. Canva, Figma, and Sketch are also very good. I just don't have any experience using those, so I can't speak to their ease of use. But Adobe is the way to go, and it's pretty affordable. So, again, what to look for? Uh, I have a friend named Drew Hamlet who, in my opinion, is the real deal. He is very, very good, and he has done some work for some very, I mean, I'll just say it, very famous people. One of those would be the band Death Cab for Cutie. He did their website, he did their marketing material, he did the graphics for their T-shirts, their album cover, their record sleeve. He did it from top to bottom, and he did a great job. But something I want you to pay attention to is the flexibility that Drew has. So all three examples of the website are from Drew, and if you look at the difference in them, you can see that his style is similar, but that one in the middle in particular, that one is for a bakery. Looks like specifically a cupcake shop, and what I really like about that is his use of color. It reminds me of frosting. It has like a sweet feel to it, doesn't it? And even the font choices that he's used, the Cupcake Royale up at the top, that's familiar to us. We've seen something like that, maybe not the same thing, but we've seen similar branding for other food products, specifically sweets and pastries when it comes to that type of font. So, what I want you to pay attention to if you decide to hire a designer is somebody that not only can build a nice looking website, but demonstrates flexibility based on the client's needs. Um, Clark Beggs is also a friend of mine. He's very good at branding and graphic design. And oh, wouldn't you know it? That's my website down there. If you'd like to take a look at what I do, you can pop over to my website. And even though I don't have any web design, I do have some design examples on there that you can look at to get an idea of what to look for when hiring a designer for maybe graphics. Um, you can reach out to both Drew and Clark. I believe they have both started their own design studio. So if you have any questions or need somebody to help you, feel free to reach out to them. When it comes to site builders, Zoho Sites and Zoho Commerce are good, especially if you already use Zoho products. Maybe you're a Zoho One user. These things are going to integrate well with the rest of our apps, and they have some really cool features when it comes to tracking analytics, when it comes to integrating with social and campaigns. I would suggest starting there if you're already a Zoho user. But Squarespace and Wix are probably the most friendly in my experience when it comes to drag and drop sites. And I do know that there is some functionality within Zoho sites to even use a grid. Unfortunately, I can't explain to you right now how to do that, but there are some resources available when it comes to maybe some deeper dives into the functionality that Zoho sites has that some of these others don't. Also, if you would like some more resources that we have produced, oh, and you can also see a website I designed, Zoho Influence. You can pop over there. There's some very timely information that has to do with remote work that we've gotten from analysts and also people here internally at Zoho. There's no design content there yet, but I am working on that, so stay tuned. Also, Zoho Academy has a whole section when it comes to building a successful business website and making a roadmap for that. I designed the workbooks that go along with that content, and they're all free and they're all meant to be interactive. So print them out. They have some exercises in there that you can fill out, and they're meant to be something to just have on your desk as a referral. Um, just to help keep you on track when it comes to telling your brand story. Also, the future is a website that I personally frequent quite a bit for sources of inspiration. And also, they have workbooks that are free as well when it comes to, you know, increasing business revenue and things like that through your website. So, hopefully, you found this informative. We have some more content for you as it pertains to your business and your website. Converting visitors to customers is our next webinar, and that's going to be through the use of forms, CTAs, and other tools. This is stuff that I would highly suggest that you pay attention to, especially if you're designing your own website. This is one that I wouldn't miss personally. Also, Zoho One for every business need. Likely your business has a need, and we've got an app to fill that need. So please return for that. And Lyra's going to do a great job explaining how Zoho One can help you. Um, Most importantly, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. If you have any questions, we will get to those here. There will be a time where I can answer questions that you might have. But, sometimes questions pop up later and you think, oh man, I wish I could have asked him this or that. Contact me. That's my Zoho email. That's my personal email address there. If you have any questions or need advice on any of the stuff that we talked about today, or have suggestions or critiques, I'm even open to that. Please feel free. You can follow what I do on Zoho Influence on Instagram and also zoho.com/influence. And we are always interested in feedback and suggestions. So there is the link to the survey, and we would really appreciate it if you fill that out. And at this point, I again would like to say thank you so much for your time, and we will talk to you again soon.